welcome back to This Our Daily Life. And today with me, I have Michaela from Maison de Châtillon. You
Hello.
guys might remember that we had done a video before. We were talking about just kind of how to take care of your health. And today, Michaela, would you introduce the topic that we have today?
Today we are talking about, I believe we came up with the title Father Wound, right? So we are talking about basically the relationship that, this can go for men or women, but, since we are women, it might be a little easier to connect to what we're saying. But basically the relationship with your father, how important it is, and, just the complexities of it, because sometimes it just so happens that it's not very healthy, and how to manage and deal with that, and I think it's both of us come from backgrounds where we have a very, is this okay to say?
You can say anything on my channel.
Okay. We both have very I'd say troubled fathers, so it can be really complex, and we're both in our 20s, but our whole lives it took to getting to this point to finally be able to understand like how to set boundaries with that unhealthy relationship. So that's kind of the video today.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean things. I think for me, especially because it's challenging because we're still living in a combined space, whereas you are not any longer. So it's so like the boundaries are different. But for me, what I have learned is like putting up emotional boundaries and not allowing people to drain your energy is really really important. And also to forgive but not excuse. I think that those are some of the things that I would like to cover today that is really important. So did you have like something that you wanted to start off with in mind at all?
So so I want to start off by kind of, because in my case, I do have, my father, like I said, he's troubled, and it's a toxic relationship with him. But I kind of wanted to talk about what could make a relationship with your dad toxic, like what is not okay, right? Because when it's your own parent, especially if you grew up in a more traditional household where like you're supposed to respect and honor your father, like where that's something that's very much like talked about and pressed upon. I feel like it can be hard to like realize what is too far and when your own father has like pushed a boundary, or not even a boundary but just like a general like stepping too much out of line with you,
Mm-hmm.
because for me personally, my father is not an emotionally abusive person. Well, I mean, like when I was a little kid, and because I did used to live with him, of course, and that was a little more the case when I was a kid growing up with him, because I was always around, but now I'm not, right? And so I thought, because I wasn't living with him anymore, like the relationship did change. It really did. Like, he's not emotionally abusive to me anymore. And he never was physically abusive to me at all, which, I do feel for people who experience that with their fathers. Like, that's insane, honestly. But the thing is, okay, so the way he's toxic in my life personally, like what people might be able to relate to, is that even though he's not attacking me emotionally, physically, or, he still is trying to take from me like more than I'm able to give to him. So he basically has a lot of his own troubles and stuff that he deals with, and I've always been somebody that loves to help people and help solve problems, which is why like I started a YouTube channel, because I care about like helping people improve their lives and stuff, and I always have loved that. And so I feel that way even towards family members and even my dad, and so what happened was I had been letting him like basically use me as like a therapist for years, like listen to all of his problems, and just really like the issue is like he'll tell me his issues, but but like I'll give solutions and advice, and they don't actually take the advice. And people like that, it's not always just your father, it can be friends like that, boyfriends, girlfriends, and like you're giving them all this advice and time, and they're constantly crying in your lap, but then like they don't actually make any changes, and so they're just stuck in this cycle of like negativity. And there comes a point where it's so bad for you to just sit there and listen to it, and like no matter how strong your shoulders are, because it does make a difference. If you're strong yourself, you can deal with it a little bit longer, but like the truth is, like, it's just negative energy and it's weighing you down so much, and like it causes like serious like emotional stress. And the problem with stress is that leaks out into other areas of your life. So it's not just a selfish thing where, you know, you're like, I don't want to deal with his negativity because I just like to have fun. It's more of a thing where like, I don't want to deal with this all the time because I don't want to be sick. It makes me sick from the stress, you know, and like stress kills people. So it's like I try to like limit that, you know. So I'm just, for me, that's just my kind of situation with my father. He's, you know, like comes to me sort of like a very, he needs me a lot, you know, and so I'm like, I'm always like there for him and helping him and like doing things for him. But then I realized like, I'm like, I can't do that anymore. And there's no gray area. It's only like black and white. It's like I either am helping him and listening to him vent and like whatever, or nothing, because there's no in between. Like I can't just see him and be around him without him bringing up every problem he's ever had in his whole life and
Yeah.
asking why this is happening to him. And it's just like, you know, so for me, that's my toxic, you know, situation. So I wanted to start with just telling somebody, like telling everybody here, like what I'm experiencing with that, because that's something that I'm sure a lot of, you know, not hopefully not a lot, but some females out there are dealing with their parents. So
Mm-hmm.
for you, like what are you experiencing in your own
Yeah.
relationship?
Yeah. So what I would say, and it's really interesting to hear you frame everything, because I have I haven't really thought about this in a very long time, but there was a running joke in our family that I was somebody in our family, because my dad would always say, will somebody come over here and clean this? Will somebody take care of the kids? Will somebody cook the dinner? Like he would literally say those things out loud. And we had labels for everyone in the family. So my my brother was whoever did this needs to get over here. um like my we had my other little sister was nobody, you know, did nobody do this, you know. But he never used our names ever. He like very seldom would just ask me to do something, but he would always assume that I would do it.
Yeah.
And my any needs that I had were just not considered. And so I started just not considering my needs as well. It was just, I was expected, whether I was in pain, whether I was tired, whether I had homework, whether I'd been doing anything all day, it was just expected there would be that, you know, like the kids would be taken care of, that there would be dinner on the table, that there would be all these things. And I was only like, you know, I was very young when this all started. I was like, you know, 12. And I think some of that too was like self-imposed, because I couldn't stand seeing my siblings be neglected, and I couldn't stand seeing my like the house be in disarray. And my father would come home a lot of the time, and he would either be completely in his own world or and ignore everything, or he would get angry about what was going on in the household and say, like, you know, why is everything messy? And for me, like I remember getting so frustrated because I would wake up early. I would, like, you know, I would, and there were times, like, I'm not gonna lie and say I did this every single day of my whole life, because there were times when I would give up, you know what I mean? But then eventually it would just be like, I have to do this because nobody else is doing this. So I would get up
Mm-hmm.
super early. I would, like, you know, go to school. And then a lot of times when I was in high school, like for pretty much my whole high school career, I would get up early enough to, like, clean everything, do like all my chores, make sure that the kids were taken care of, like to the bus stop or wherever they needed to go. And then I would do some breakfast cooking for everybody and try to get some dinner cooking done for everyone. And then I would, like, walk to school, come back, do it all over again. And then my siblings would come home. And as soon as they would walk in, they would, like, throw all of their, you know, all their, like, their backpacks and coats. And it was just like they would just go straight into mess mode. And then my dad would come home and get angry with me because it was messy when I had spent all day, like, doing everything that I could to clean, you know. And so when I had to discipline the kids, and it was a lot. But with my relationship with him, I would say that mostly he was absent. He didn't pay any attention to me, and then when he did pay attention to me, it was only to get my energy. So, like, if I was talking to my sister in the kitchen, he would, like, insert himself into the conversation even when he wasn't asked to join the conversation. And it wasn't like we wanted him to, because we felt neglected by him, right? So it was just like he would show up when he wanted to, and then he would vaporize whenever he wanted to. So he couldn't be there consistently emotionally for me. And never was, like, actively my father, if that makes sense. He was never actively like, Ashley, is there something that you need? Like, you know, he never talked to me about what was going on with my mom. He never talked to me about what was even going on at the house. It was just assumed that I would do everything, and then he would get to pop in and pop out whenever he wanted. And and I fully recognize, and this is maybe like a segue to what we can talk about next, but I fully recognize that he has mental illness as I've had. And like, I don't know if you're comfortable with sharing your story, but like, just, I think a lot of times people have mental struggles because of both genetics and because of stress that they've had in their life, because I know that stress triggers a lot of things. And I also think that because I had such high levels of cortisol in my body and I was so stressed all the time, that led to like faster degeneration of my spine. It led to like a lot of other health problems because I had such high stress levels as a young child. So like now I'm working on, I would say, emotionally distancing myself from my father, and not having any expectations of him. I do not place anything on him because I know that he's incapable of giving me any emotional strength. And so I've looked to other father figures. I have God, I have my mom, I have good friends, and learning how to. I think the hardest part is standing up for myself, because I've learned that I have to set boundaries and say, I can no longer do this because I'm in pain, or I can't do this because I'm tired, I don't have the energy to do this, or it's simply not my responsibility, which I think is very hard. If you've been made responsible for everything at a really young age, you feel like you're responsible for everything. But there are certain things where it's like, I just have to take care of myself, and I'm not responsible for this.
Yeah. Well, pardon me. I think it's really interesting to hear, like you said, like your story, just like you were hearing mine, like hearing it framed out, I guess, because yeah, I didn't realize like how that was like a frequent, like everyday occurrence for you in your life. Like I heard some stories, but now like realizing and like actually being able to put it together, because yeah, it's like it's a thing where like when somebody is always like for the most part, when they are good to you, like your parent, your dad, he's good to you and he takes care of you, but he has a hard day, right? Or he does something that's like harsh. Like when he's the majority of the time they're good to you, it's kind of just like, yeah, like I understand, but when somebody is the majority of the time just takes from you, it's like, and then they're nice once in a while, it's like, I don't know, you don't focus on the few nice things, you just don't, it's like you try to, and that's what keeps you like coming back to them, besides the many other reasons, because it's your own father, right? But like, let's just say to all the young girls listening that growing up is amazing, because especially because like, yes, you can leave that household, but like there are cases like your father right now is with you, and I'm sure a lot of girls right now who are quarantining with their family,
Yeah.
if they have like a father that's kind of just hard for them to like connect to, and he just like is very just not fatherly to them,
Mm-hmm.
I really just want to like tell you to like stay calm, because you will grow up. But let's think of some like tips, right, that we can give to
Yeah.
um, ladies living with their fathers right now, and like how they can, like you're saying, like healthfully emotionally distance themselves from their father. And then maybe after that I'll talk about like beyond that, when you don't live with him anymore, like, so like let's start with that. I think that would be a really good
Yeah.
thing, 'cause I think a lot of girls can relate to that right now when they're like quarantining with their families.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the main things is to not fall into the trap of hating men. And like for me personally, it's still very hard to trust men. It's just hard because like you get into this mindset where, the one figure that you've had over you has been either inconsistent or hasn't been there for you. And so you're always ready to like jump ship or take care of yourself. And I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't have the means to take care of herself, because I really do. I think every person on the planet, like especially nowadays, should have a way to take care of themselves. And I think for me, like with being sort of disabled right now, it makes me feel even more mistrusting, because then you're like, well, like nobody's cared so far, so why would somebody else care? So it makes you like really hold back your heart, which I think it's like you have to find the correct people to trust. You have to find the correct people that you can rely on, right? Because you shouldn't just be handing out your trust like candy. You need to be wise. But I would say, like, really don't fall into the trap of hating men. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that there aren't any good guys, because there are good men out there who really do want to love and provide and protect for a family. And they're like, don't fall into the trap of also thinking that you are alone, because there you always have God as your father. And I think that for those of us who've had not great relationships with our father, it's really, really tough to receive love from God as though he's your father. But I was very grateful that, like, I mean, I came to know the Lord by myself when I was 3. And so I had a really strong bond with God all the way from way back then. So like I've gone through a lot of ups and downs with God. I'm sure he's like, this was her teenage phase, and this was her, this was her phase when she tried to run away, but he's been there with me the whole time. And so he was very, like, I had that. And I feel sad for people who grow up hating or mistrusting God because of what happened to them with their father. So I would say, like, find men, even if they're just men that are like, I wouldn't say, I think a lot of girls fall into this trap of like looking at the movies and wanting men to be like they are in the movies, and they're not. Like I always say, loving a man is like loving a horse. It's not like your Breyer, it's not your Breyer ponies. It's like there's actual like dirt, and there's actual, like effort that goes into it. And like sometimes you get your toes stepped on, and like sometimes the horses don't smell that great, but you love horses, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like all those things that go along with reality. So don't look at the movies and like want men to be like they're in the movies. Find some actual good men who are really good to their families to look up to. So like for me, I have, like, everyone always laughs at this, but I have like John Foreman from Switchfoot. He and like that group of guys, they like gave me so much hope. And I was able to really look at them as role models and as like a beacon of light for what I wanted to find in my spouse, or even just in my male friends, what I wanted to see. So someone who is honest, someone who admits their flaws, someone who's always trying to do their best, and someone who really wants to love their family. So
yeah, that's important. So I like what you're saying about, I don't know, don't look for a guy in the movie. Like, because it's just, like, you see the girls in movies, and as a girl you relate to some of the fun quirky stuff, but like, their lives, it's not actually how life is, like in their high school experience, that's not how high school is. So I think it's also important not to run into the arms of the first man that tells you, I love you, like, besides your father, right? So for me, when I was, I think like 17, well, okay, when I was 14, I had my first boyfriend. And that's young, right? It was a rather innocent relationship. I was 14, but, we thought we were like going to get married, and we were so in love. And, the thing is, I know it's common. It's not that uncommon. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone has a bad dad, right? If like a little kid is like getting into a relationship, but I know that the reason that I wanted a relationship is because I wanted a male that, wasn't like my brother, like I wanted a male who could like love me for me, and I could be vulnerable around him, and like, I just wanted a man to like protect me, right? So I was looking for that since I was 14. And then I dated a lot of guys, but like, I'm always had very like strict standards when it came to sharing myself with people. Like, I'm like, I want your attention, but I don't want anything else, so and like, I feel glad that I had those boundaries, but like a lot of girls don't, like there's a lot of young girls who are getting into relationships at like age 12 and like giving themselves away completely to guys. And this is actually a reality that we're living in. And I think when it gets to that extent, I don't think a girl that's living a healthy life at home is going to be doing that. I just really don't, because when you're around people who are teaching you properly, like training, like your parents, they're supposed to be guiding you. You don't just not do the bad things in life because your parents said don't do that. You don't do it because they explain to you the deep, like the depth, the depth of like the actual consequences of living your life just for like a cheap thrill, and like how it can really hurt you. So like having that guidance, like my parents didn't explain anything to me when I was a kid, like especially my father, like he didn't get into like why you shouldn't just trust men and like not like men in general, but why you shouldn't just trust boyfriends. And like, he didn't explain any of that. He just said no. I was like, no, well, you don't really care about me, so I don't really care that you said no. So but I was like, so that's kind of a problem. But so what I'm saying is like, don't run into the arms of men in order to replace that love from your father. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's a really, it's so common, and like, you know, has like a name for it, when girls do that. But I just think like I see girls do it their whole lives, their whole entire lives. And like what we do, and this is like a well-known thing, right? What we do as women is we kind of look for, well, we don't intentionally look for, but we end up with men that when we're not careful, you know, when we're just clingy to every guy, we end up attracting and being attracted to men that slightly remind us of our father,
Mm-hmm.
because it's familiar, and because we
Yeah.
know what it would be like to be treated by a guy like that, right? We see the red flags, but we're like, oh, I'm familiar with this because this is how my father treats me. Like, you know, not in all areas, but like, you know, my father, he ignores me, or like, you know, whatever, but it's okay, he's my father, he's still in my life, right? So that's safe
Yeah.
and that's familiar. So I'll be with a guy that's like pretty like low rent, you know, because yeah, it's familiar to me. And so like girls like into their mid-20s and stuff, they're constantly seeking another guy, and the guy will treat them like garbage, and then they will fall apart. So yeah, I'm saying like don't just run into the arms of men boyfriends, right? Because you want to find a man to trust. So I
Yeah.
like what you're saying, Ashley, about, you know, John Foreman, right? It's John Foreman, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so he's like your father figure, but that might sound strange to people, but the thing is, if they think of it like he's your mentor, you know,
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
way, he mentors you. So you look at his life, you know about his life, and you take tips from that, and like you want to live that way, and you find that admirable. That is so important, you know, find mentors, because I had a mentor and an actual life coach when I was 18 years old, and I didn't appreciate her as much at the time. She put in, had weekly meetings with her, and she wasn't a man, but she was like a businesswoman, and she was like
Yeah.
teaching me about finance, like she was teaching me about relationships, she was teaching me about all this stuff, and I was in a really toxic relationship at the time. And I only absorbed a little bit of what she was saying at the time, but I took notes and stuff, and like I was grateful to her completely even then, but I didn't realize how much value she was bringing me until later, because I was so fogged up by that toxic relationship I was in, which was just literally for the point of having somebody that loved me. I just wanted some guy that loved me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, my mom loves me, but that's not enough. Like, I need a guy that loves me too, you know? And so like you settle for what's available, you know, and
Yeah.
you tell yourself, like when you're a little girl, like I will never let a guy treat me negatively, I will never let a guy treat me bad, until it's actually happening. And you're like, part of me, you're like, oh, attached to him, and at that point it's you have a hard time walking away. So I say avoid that trap to begin with. Avoid, you know, stepping into those relationships, and find a mentor, because now, even though it's been years later, I'm 24, the words that my mentor gave me then have like completely, I've placed those, like apply those to my life, and it's made a huge difference. But yeah, it's important to have male mentors too, like you're saying, like males you can look up to. So you know, there are good men out there, and men who actually do things to help people in the world, and I just think patience is important too, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't feel like because right now you might not have even one man in your life you can look up to, that you need to rush and get a boyfriend, because that's what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Not good,
No.
not a good
Yeah.
idea, because he's just going to take away, because your like fast food boyfriend that you're getting right now is going to take away a little bit from what your amazing future husband king, right, is going to, you know, get from you. And it doesn't mean you'll never be whole if you're with a bad guy, right? But it does, you never can forget it, you never can forget those experiences, and you learn from them, and yes, they can make you better, but you can also learn from other people's experiences.
Yes, exactly. And I think the
That's what I
same goes,
recommend.
yes, exactly. And the same goes for guys too. Like, you know, guys, like, I think a lot of times, you know, they settle for just like, you know, quick and easy girlfriends. And it's just, wait for your queen. You know what I mean? Because there are kings and queens out there. It's just there, you have to wait, and you have to be willing to go the extra mile. You know, you can't just expect someone to, I don't know, like you can't expect someone to just give to you all the time without you putting in the deposit into your own life first. You have to start developing yourself, and your relationships will get better. And that doesn't mean that you won't find someone who will be patient with you, but you also have to be doing your fair share of the work. And I think the other thing too that I would say before you get into any kind of relationship is be in a very secure relationship with yourself. Like, really like yourself, because the truth is, and I did this, I don't know if you saw my video, the last video that I just did, but I was saying how, like, no one is going to perfectly love you the way that God loves you.
Yeah.
And we're always looking for that perfect love. And it's just like, it's, even if you have a wonderful relationship with someone, they can't know your every thought. They can't be your life support. God's your life support, nobody else is. And if you are really content with yourself, when God brings you someone, it's just like an adding to, it's not like you're everything. Does that make sense? So it's this delightful adding to, and you're not so anxious about it. And I'm one to talk, because I can get anxious about relationships and things, but it's like, I'm really content in who I am. So, like, if I were to lose all of my relationships, I would still be okay, because I know who I am, and I'm not like, I'm no longer trying this is still something that I'm learning, but I'm no longer trying to just run around and please the people in my life so that they will stay. It's like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And if you want to stay, you can stay. But I know what I'm called to do, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not going to sacrifice parts of me so that people stay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now to talk about so where I'm at right now with my father, this is also something other ladies, maybe you can relate to, even men that might be watching, you might be able to relate to this. You're an adult and you do not live with your father anymore. But sadly, the relationship is still toxic. Like, when I do talk to him or see him or anything, it's always just like, it's ridiculous. It's like a cycle, like literally like a merry-go-round. Is that what it's called? A merry-go-round. A merry-go-round of just the same emotional problems over and over. Why doesn't everyone at my work like me? Why do they argue with me? Oh, why did this, like, because my parents are divorced, like, why did my second wife this, why is this way? Why does everything happen to me? I'm a good person, I'm a good man. It's like he's talking to himself in the mirror, basically. Like, I don't even need to be there, but I need to listen. And so I give him advice. I'm like, this is the harsh truth, because I'm looking at this from like a psychological perspective, and like, if you want your life to change, this is what you need to do. And then this is how he acts. He tells me that I don't care about him. He's like, oh, really? You're gonna diss your own father? Like, he literally says diss. It's just the funniest thing.
Yeah.
Like, I love him just because of how he is. Sometimes he's just so ridiculous. Like, but he means it though, and that's the problem. Like, if he was joking, I would be like, you're hilarious. But no, he's like, you're gonna diss me by like making me feel small when I'm already down. It's like,
Yeah.
listen, if I hug you, right, and I hold you when you're going through this, you're still going to be going through it, and you're still going to repeat the same things. And if I listen and I hold your hand, and you're still going to have the same issues. If I give you advice, you're still going to continue the same things that are causing those issues in your life, because his problem, and this is the truth for a lot of men who are like this. So ladies, pay attention to this, is if they keep having the same occurrences in their life, it's because they're doing the same things. And the definition of like, and like, I don't know if this is actually true, but they say one of the definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And so he's never doing anything different to change it. So for years, trust me, for years, like, I moved out when I was 18 years old and didn't live with any parents or anything. And so from that point, I didn't live with him, and I tried to maintain a relationship with him. And so it's just so toxic for me, because all these years it's just been the same thing of like the problem cycling. And it's like, the thing is, like, my time is valuable, and I have to set aside time to spend it with my family, because that's a priority for me. That's important. Like, I need that. But like, if it's spending time with my family means it's going to weigh me down so heavily and make me depressed and stressed out. I get stressed out for 2 days after one single phone call with him. I can't handle it, because it's just like, I can't stop thinking about how his whole life sucks so much. And it's just like, there's nothing I can do. And like, he keeps making it worse and worse. And like, I try to help him so much. And I've not even tried. I've literally helped him given him money and done all of these things, and like nothing fixes it because he doesn't change. And so when it comes to your father, your boyfriend, your best friend, anybody in your life who is cycling like on this merry-go-round of the same emotional problems and issues in their life, and they won't change no matter how much you try to help them and advise them and be there for them, it's because truly they don't want to change. It's that familiarity. They know this, and so they are staying where they think it's safe. When really, if they just risked it all, and got themselves uncomfortable, really uncomfortable from their, story they're telling themselves about their lives would change. But like, you can tell them that, and that's not really going to do anything. They have to make that decision on their own. So what I've done is I've stopped talking to my father. It's sad, but like I don't answer his calls, and it took me a long time to feel okay with it. I would feel very guilty, and like, like my fiance to be will like tell me like, you should answer his call, and I said, I love that you care about him and that you want me to be there for him. I really do. But like, he doesn't understand the depth of like the relationship. So I've talked to him, and like a couple times, admittedly, I think this might help other girls too who have trouble with their dads, and their dad is calling them up and like basically vomiting all this negativity on the phone. Put the phone on speaker around one of your friends, your boyfriend or something, and let one other person hear. Don't like embarrass them in front of a lot of people, but let them hear what he's saying so that they can understand like why you're making this decision, that you don't want to talk to them, so that they don't just think that if it matters to you, and if they're curious, so that they don't just think you are being selfish. It really doesn't matter what other people think about you when it comes to protecting yourself, but sometimes you do want to explain yourself, and that's a good way. That's what I did. And so now my fiance to be understands why, so I don't feel as guilty, because that was kind of hard for me, like knowing that somebody else was like, well, why are you just not talking to your dad? Like, why, how could you do that? It's like, it's complicated. It's really complicated, and it's really hard. And so then I was talking to Ashley, and I was like telling, Ashley, I'm like talking to you, but that's to you.
Someone else. It's okay.
About, I was talking to you about my decision not to be talking to him anymore. And, you made me feel really calm and good about it, because it's like, the thing is, you know that I have like a leveled head, and that the decision I'm making about a relationship in my life is going to be one that is for like, it's not just something frivolous, right? Like, it's a big deal. And so like, you helped me to feel like I could trust my instincts and make that decision, because for me, like, if when I do get married, like I would invite my father, of course. Like, it's not so abusive to me, my relationship with him, that like I can never be around him, but like, yeah, casually and day to day I can't. So ladies, you don't need to feel bad if you have to cut off a family member. Right now I'm talking about a father specifically, and that's one's really hard, because that's somebody you knew since you were a little girl. But like, it's okay to not have a relationship. And he doesn't call me all the time asking for things anymore. I think he understands, but like, I'm also pretty lucky because I have 5 other siblings, and so he has other people he can call too. It's not just like me or nobody. But even if it is just you, like if you are an only child and you need to cut off a relationship with your father, just know like nobody in the world, kind of like what you're saying in your video, is going to protect you except for you, right? Mm-hmm. You are alone besides yourself. That's not a bad thing, but that's important to know, that you are responsible for keeping yourself safe. And you being harmed, like there's like, if the price tag for you having a relationship with your father is your sanity, you know what, that price tag is too high. If it's your peace, it's too high.
Yeah.
So don't feel guilty. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just say that goes for any relationship. Like, if you have a friend that's doing that to you, if you have a sibling that's doing that to you at some point, and it's not just for your sake, it is for theirs. Because like we were talking about this earlier, when you help someone and they are refusing to help themselves, you're enabling them. And so if you're constantly just giving money to someone who's going to spend it on something that's frivolous, or if you're constantly giving advice and you know that they're not going to take it, or you're constantly giving time to someone and you know that they're just there to take your energy and then they're going to go home and feel just as bad as they did before, it's a waste, because you're not helping them grow. And if you are dedicated to your personal growth, you have to be with people who are also dedicated to that. You can't be around people who are just like on that slippery slope down. You have to be climbing, or else gravity takes over. And if you're with people like that, all it's going to do is weigh you down. It doesn't mean that you can't keep climbing, but these people will weigh you down and slow down your progress. And the other thing too is like, being raised in a traditional home, I do not think is a negative thing, but I do think, like what you were saying at the beginning, is that sometimes people will take a traditional setting and they will push it to the limit, where like, a father is someone who should rule with a loving hand. That is not someone who should be hitting you. That is not someone who should be obsessive over controlling. That is not someone who should be like withholding care for you. That shouldn't be someone who's like dictating your every little decision. And I think sometimes when you're raised in those situations, because I've had friends who've had very, very controlling fathers, and when you're raised in those kinds of situations, you feel so guilty about breaking away. But that's an unhealthy father. A good father is someone who will provide, and he will protect, and he will set boundaries for you, because that's needed, especially when you're a child. You have to have boundaries. Like, I am not for these like free families where it's just like everybody does whatever they want, you know what I mean? But knowing what a father is and what a father isn't is really, really important. So even studying like just what a good father would be like according to a classic traditional sense that is uplifting is really important. And I mean, I know this sounds silly, but I do think that watching things like Little House on the Prairie, or like the Waltons, or like shows where there's a really good dad figure, I think that's helpful for everybody. I like, especially like for young men out there, if they are watching this, like I would really, really recommend like watching those old classic shows with really good dads to see how they handled situations, because a lot of that is like, if you didn't have that kind of a dad, you can actually learn those things from watching that. You can learn those things from reading books and stuff too. But I feel like when you see the visual of like what a loving father looks like, you can undo some of the things that you learned. Because I think that for guys too, like a lot of them maybe had an absent father or abusive father, and so they just end up doing those same things to their women and children, and they don't maybe mean to. But if you haven't said, this behavior from my father was not okay, and I will now correct it, it will repeat. And the same for like a woman, like if she sees behavior in, like I've noticed traits in myself that are from my father that I'm like, I do not want to have this trait anymore, so I will work to undo it. And so I've been very purposeful about it. So you can undo what your parents have done, and you can forgive them. Like we were talking about this last night, where you can see your parent as a child who grew up and had a child, and you go, wow, they like, at least I'm alive. Like that's amazing that like they got me to where I am now, right? Like I didn't die. Like they held me, they fed me, they provided a shelter for me. But that doesn't mean that everything they did was wonderful or perfect or even good. And so you are alive. Like you can honor your father and mother by saying like, thank you for giving me life, thank you for bringing me here to this planet, thank you for the good things that you did, I recognize the bad things that you did, and I forgive them, and I refuse to repeat them. And so if that means that at that point you need to cut off the relationship, I think as long as you don't have bitterness in your heart and you are forgiving, that is honoring your parent, because you're doing what's best for you, and you have honored them in your heart, and you're not just like writing your parents off, you know what I mean? Because I think that's something that is, I don't think that's good for your own soul. I don't think that's good for your own energy. So
yes. Some forgot to mention it, making sure that tell your parents, why you're taking space. If it's an emergency, if they're hitting you, you don't owe anybody an explanation. You get yourself out of there. But if you're like in my situation with my dad, like I told him, I was like many times, but I told him like once and for all, I was like, I'm not going to be your savior. I'm not, that wasn't my job. I can't focus on, building up my own life. And what will happen if I completely just focus on taking care of you, and your emotional needs, and not just like, being a nice, good family member. But if I'm focusing on that, like I cannot make my own life for myself, and I'm going to end up being somebody who needs somebody else to completely like be my therapist for my trauma that I'm going through right now for like what I'm doing with you. So I'm like, I'm sorry. And he wouldn't hear it. He's like, no, you're just blah blah blah. I got so upset. And it's just like, it's okay, I said it, I told him. And and there's the same kind of thing when you have to leave like a toxic friendship. You tell them like, I'm just not as productive when I'm spending so much time with you. Like, I care about you though. Like, I want you to know that. And, like, you have to accept that they are going to take it personally. You have to accept that.
Yeah.
They're going to take it personally, and that hurts, but years later down the road, they most likely will be able to get a different perspective on it, you know, and thank you for that, because like Ashley was saying, it is enabling
Yeah.
when you continue to let somebody, you know, walk all over you like that because they're not taking the space and time that they need to heal themselves.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah. And I think like what you were saying about addressing behavior with friends and family, and I think that's so important because I think a lot of times we don't do that. We just sort of ghost each other. And it's so unhelpful because like then they if you don't tell them, they'll never know. And you're not giving them a choice. Now for some people, like some people honestly you do have to ghost because they don't get it, you know, and you're like, I've told you, or I've really been trying to say this to you, and you're like just not hearing me, which is kind of how it will be probably with my father. I've spent hours talking to him, and it's harder because in my situation it is a little bit more volatile than maybe it was with your situation. Like I don't want to assume, but like there was a lot more like yelling, getting close, and like you know, like there's just been a lot more where it's like the situation would get a more like he never grabbed me, but there were times where it was like very close to that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So feeling really physically unsafe. And so and I recognize his trauma with his parents, and I recognize his his own mental issues, but there's at this point there's like no excuse for that behavior, and I've already talked to him so much about it that at this point I probably will just kind of leave his life once I'm done, and it with my time in the house, and that is not disrespectful at all in my heart. It's just something I have to do to protect myself. So yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice because like, yeah, I like what you're saying, how you recognize that you have to confront behavior, but then there comes a point where if they're not getting it or they're not hearing you and they don't want to listen, that ghosting, right? So ignoring them is the safest option. And that is something that I think is really useful for a lot of people. It's like, ignore that person as much as you can and build your life in the meantime. Like when you have to live with that parent, like still build your life, make your life good, and get ready to be able to, when you are finally ready to move out and not be with them, like be ready, don't just sit and cry about the trouble that you're having with your parent. You're responsible for making your life good for yourself, which is why you don't need to feel guilty about ghosting them or ignoring them or not answering their calls, because you have to take care of you, and you can't take care of other people when you're just broken, right? I mean, you can, but like you have a lot more to give when you are healthy, and being healthy is not just like what you're consuming, it's also a mental thing, as we are all well aware, in this day and age, mental health has been highlighted, and I think it's been highlighted, but the issue is we're not really getting a lot of guidance on how to heal from it. It's just awareness. Why do we need to spread awareness for mental health problems?
Mm-hmm.
Because what that does is just like, okay, yes, I'm aware. Like, let me just talk about how mentally ill I am, instead of like, this is exactly what you need to do and be working on daily.
Yes. We should do another video on that
yourself.
because we've both
and so that's the biggest thing is like
yeah.
well, we will next
yes. So because I think that's something that we're both very passionate about, is like you can heal from mental illness. You do not have to stay stuck there. You might always have to have some medication or take extra supplements or be careful, but there are ways that you can heal that. So okay, so thank you everyone. I know. Thank you everyone for listening to our Real Talk today. This has been Michaela from Maison Station and Ashley from Miss Our Daily Life. And we thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you learned something from it. Like Michaela said, reach out in the comments if you guys have questions or if there's something you missed, and we will talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, and I'm going to pause.